Hi friends, Nathan here with Family Protection Ministries. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about state workers and the push to get them back to work in person and getting pushback from unions. We'll be talking a little bit about some themes in legislation, and we'll be talking about some exciting developments relating to our event in September, the Homeschool Freedom Day at the Reagan Library. So I would encourage you to stay tuned for that. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Front Line with FPM, where we talk about California politics, homeschool freedom, parental rights, and the family. I'm your host, Nathan Pierce, and thanks for joining us today. Let's jump right in and see what's going on here on the Front Line. Have you ever wondered how Paul Revere was instructed to make his midnight ride? Well, I didn't realize it, but there was actually a letter given to him with instructions, and that letter, interestingly enough, is still around. The letter instructing Paul Revere to do his midnight ride, warning the Americans of the British coming. Well, that letter is actually going to be on display at the Reagan Library during our event in September, Homeschool Freedom Day. I would encourage you to check into our event, Homeschool Freedom Day. It's going to be an amazing conference there at the Reagan Library. And it happens to be during a special exhibit of the 250th anniversary of our country. And the Paul Revere instruction letter is actually one of many amazing displays that are going to be part of that special exhibit at the Reagan Library. So among other things, come to our event on September 12th, 2026, the Homeschool Freedom Day at the Reagan Library, and participate in our conference, and also get to included in your registration for the conference is the access to the Reagan Library, including the special exhibit, the 250th celebration exhibit at the Reagan Library. So hope to see you there. Let's talk a little bit about the issue of in-person work. Sacramento Bee published an article just the other day about this issue of Newsom trying to get agencies to bring their workers back to the in-person work that they used to do prior to lockdowns of COVID, which amazingly enough, many workers, many state workers have never actually gone back to in-person work. Some have done a little bit here and there, some have gone fully back to in-person work, but many state workers are still working from home. And Newsom is pushing, along with many administrators in the government, are pushing to get them to return at least to a 4-day office week, pushing for a 4-day return to office work so that they can be in person in their offices at their workstations for at least 4 days a week. And unions are opposing this. I've bumped into many demonstrations at the Capitol of people opposing having to go back to in-person work at their workstations, at the agencies that they work at. An excerpt from this article says California agencies should prepare for state employees to work primarily in person come July 1st. This is from a letter that Gavin Newsom sent to his cabinet secretaries earlier this week. Not having sufficient space, he says, for state workers to be in offices 4 days a week is not an excuse for delaying or implementing his return to office order to the maximum extent feasible. He says that all available workstations must be filled at least 4 days per week. So they have empty workstations at these government agencies, and they are trying to get workers to come back, yet Newsom, while he's pushing all of this, he's getting pushback from unions saying that the state is not ready for those workers to come back. They can't support them as they need to be supported, and workers like to work from home, so they prefer that, and so Newsom shouldn't be pushing for them to come back to work. This has been sort of an ongoing issue for not just months, but years now, of various administrators, agency heads, department directors within the state government saying, hey, this isn't working to have everybody working from home. Some people, yeah, maybe, or part-time, but having so many people work so much of their time, and many people all of their time from home, is not functional for the government. And so we need to push them back to come back to work in person, because the work is just not functional. It's not getting done. Some workers are doing well, some are not. And so the unions are pushing against Newsom on this one, which is interesting. Newsom is at war with unions, saying that we need to have people work for the government in person, and unions are saying no. But this is a big hot topic at the Capitol. There have been many very well attended rallies here at the Capitol, people arguing against having to go back to in-person work. So it's a very big issue here, and it's something that I think we all need to be aware of, because our government is not functioning as well as it could be, certainly not as it should be, but not as well as it could be if more workers were actually in person and reporting for their jobs at their workstations. And even it's so bad that even Newsom is recognizing that it's dysfunctional and needs to be addressed. And it is also interesting, as I pointed out, that the unions are at odds with Newsom on this topic, and they're the ones behind the rallies that I've been talking about, that they're opposing Newsom very publicly. And so I think that is I think that's probably it's probably a good thing to see more issues where Newsom and unions are at odds with each other, but it's also important to see that there are conservatives that have been pushing for in-person work, and finally there's a acknowledgement of, well, maybe that's the right way to go, and unions are definitely pushing back on that. So just pray for peace and unity, I would say, in our leaders and wisdom as they try to address this issue, because it's very hot. There's a lot of heated conversations, and these rallies are people that they're angry about having to go back to work for whatever reason. And for whatever reason, Newsom is seeing probably a lot of different areas where it's causing dysfunction to the government, but the controversy itself is causing dysfunction within government, because we're seeing lots of arguing about it. It's filling up a lot of time, which I would say does two things. One is it keeps people from passing other bad legislation, which I've probably mentioned a few times before. It does keep people from doing other things that could be troublesome for freedom, for families, but also it is definitely taking up energy from our government, and it's costing taxpayers money to argue about this. It's taking up a considerable amount of time and resources at every level of government, at whether you're talking about Newsom's office, whether you're talking about the legislature, whether you're talking about state workers. They're putting a lot of energy into this battle as well. So it's definitely costing our state a lot of money to be arguing about this issue, and that's something that's going to impact us as families, because we have to pay the taxes that support our state workers. So we need to be praying for wisdom for our leaders, that they'd come up with solutions to this that would resolve peaceably, but also be functional, so that our government can function well, but also that we wouldn't have to be paying the extra taxes that we're having to pay right now. That's going to continue to get worse if this type of thing, if this specific issue and others like it don't get resolved. So be praying for our leaders on this. So what I want to talk about is this issue of themes in legislation this year that we're watching and are concerned about. There's bills that I've mentioned before, such as last year we had AB 727, that had to do with student ID cards, and we're grateful for the amendment to that bill. We are concerned about how it could impact private homeschooling. Right now, AB 727 has is putting certain things on student ID cards that we would disagree with and would say are inappropriate to put on student ID cards. You can check this out for more details on our bill tracker page on our website, fpmca.org. But the basic issue behind bills like 727 specifically puts a phone number, a text number for the Trevor Project, which gives students access to counselors for LGBT concerns, LGBT curious students or students that identify as LGBT students can contact counselors directly and privately about their concerns, about their feelings of LGBT issues, and it's run by an LGBT advocacy organization, so it's going to have that sort of worldview behind it. And this bill, 727, like other bills, puts information on identification cards that students have to carry around with them at school. And this is a concern to us with private homeschooling, because at some point they start putting this required information on homeschooler ID cards as well. There was originally language in 727 that required homeschool student ID cards to have this information on it as well for the LGBT counseling services. We got an amendment into 727 that excludes us from the bill, and I'm really grateful for that. But it's a trend, and that's what I'm trying to point out here now, is that there's a number of trends going on that are pushing for more information to be placed in front of kids, regardless of what school they go to. And 727 is an example of that. There have been a number of bills in the past that kind of use the same mechanism of putting information on student ID cards in order to get that in front of the eyes of kids. But we'll see more of that as things unfold. The same gentleman, the author of AB 727, has said that he is pushing more legislation like this onto ID cards for students in all schools. Particularly, he has stated that he's concerned about kids in private schools because they need specifically to be targeted for getting more information to them that is not what they're used to seeing, because those kids are more sheltered, shall we say, is his perspective on that, and they need to not be. So moving on from that, there's a number of bills this year that really focus more on the government-managed childhood systems concept. And this focus is more this particular year on early childhood education, early ages of kids in California. AB 563, AB 1914, AB 2092 point towards more centralized state run planning, coordination, and tracking of children and family services that the state provides, that they want to make sure that all of their smaller agencies and departments are talking to each other about how are you handling this particular family, and being able to put all of the information about all the different families that they provide services to, be it food stamps, be it education services, special needs services, all these different kinds of services that the state provides. They want to put all of the information about individual families and individual kids into a statewide data system, so that everybody that's participating in any or all of the state provided family services or early childhood education services, they can put all of that data into one place, so any state worker can look up information about a family or an individual. If they participate in a state program, every state department will have access to a database that has the information about every department that family bumps up against in their daily lives. And there's such a push for broadening these programs that they're really trying to get every family, every child to be participating in some program or other, so that they can have a record in these data systems for every single person. And the idea is, they use the phrase cradle to grave as a positive messaging system, a positive concept of, isn't it so great that the government cares for you and provides programs for you and tracks your data and all your needs and all you do, so that the state really knows all about you and can do the best they can to care for you, by having all of these services available to you, and then you can participate in them, and then your data is available to the state so that they can do their job the best they can, because the government really wants to help you and help you to get the right services and take care of all your needs and have your needs met by these various services. And that can be done so much better by the government if they have all of your information in one place, and that data is available to every state worker that needs it. So that's a real big push right now in California, to have data available and accessible so that they can serve the people of the state of California better. We have seen a number of other themes in legislation. The only other one I'm going to mention this morning, it has to do with sort of the smaller bits and pieces type of regulation, and there's a lot of smaller bills that have small piece adjustments to programs and services, but there's also big picture changes too. And I mentioned a few weeks ago that the governor is proposing this idea to rehash the entire education system in California from the ground up, and having that whole education system report not to a state superintendent of public instruction, but having that whole system of that newly reinvented system of education in California report directly to the governor. And that is Newsom's proposal, and he's been amending it and adjusting it and re-proposing it over the last couple of years, to come up with a way that the state can reinvent the education system and have it report directly to the governor. And this would give the governor tremendously more authority over education and over children in the state of California. I think it's a real risky business, but it's also interesting that proposal is not, definitely not, being supported by the current superintendent of public instruction, and they're sort of at odds on this topic. So there is some controversy over this proposal, but it's definitely something that is moving. The legislature has a bill, and it's moving in the legislature. It was just amended, and it's pretty large, and so it's got a lot of moving pieces in it, and there's a lot of discussion going on about it because it is such a massive overhaul of the education system in California. But that's just sort of getting the big picture stuff out there and having lots of discussions about it. And I think it's a real danger. So be praying for our leaders on that, and call your legislator to let them know that you don't think it's a good idea for the education system to report directly to the governor. I really think that that's a bad idea. And even though we don't have a specific bill that's about to be signed or something like that, there's a lot of work to be done on this project. I think the overarching big picture issue of having the education system rebuilt from the ground up and submitting or being controlled directly by the governor is a bad idea. So I would encourage you to call your legislators to encourage them to vote against any proposal that would align all of education systems underneath the governor's authority. That's not a good idea. So you can check who your legislator is on our website. We'll put a link below on the YouTube notes. So check into that. Be praying for our leaders. Be praying for us at Family Protection Ministries, that we would have wisdom, that we would have a clear understanding of the legislation, that we would write our amendment language well on the bills that we're working on, and that God would be glorified in all that we do, and that our freedoms in California would be saved. We are grateful for the 40 years that Family Protection Ministries has been protecting your right to homeschool in the state of California. We pray for another 40. Thank God for the abilities that He's given us, the successes that we've had over the years, and just pray for us this year that we'd be able to have success for another 40 years, and that for generations to come, we would be able to preserve the right to homeschool the right of families to function the way God designed the family to function, and that God would be glorified in all that we do. Thanks so much for watching. See you again next time. Thanks for joining us for this episode of The Front Line with FPM. For more information about the topics we discuss here, check out Family Protection Ministries at fpmca.org and subscribe to our channel.